The sun burned hot above the wide red desert of Sarna. The wind carried dust across the empty land. There were no trees, no rivers, and no signs of life, only rocks, heat, and silence. Tomel drove his supply rover across the hard sand. His job was simple. He carried food, tools, and water from the main base to small research posts across the desert. He had done this job for 2 years and knew the roads well. He had music playing on the old radio and a cold bottle of water beside him. Suddenly, he saw a flash in the sky. A long trail of fire cut through the clouds. It moved fast, falling from space. Then a loud boom shook the air. A black shape crashed into the desert far ahead. Smoke rose into the sky like a dark flag. Tomel stopped the rover and looked through his binoculars. He saw a broken ship burning in the sand. It was not human. It looked smooth and silver, shaped like a leaf, not built with bolts or panels like Earth ships. The crash site was at least 30 miles away from the nearest human base. He took a deep breath. Then he turned the wheel and drove toward it. After 1 hour, he reached the wreck. The heat had grown worse. The metal of the alien ship was bent and cracked. Parts were scattered across the sand. He kept his helmet on and carried a small scanner. Inside the wreck, he found signs of life. A soft blue light blinked near a door. He pushed it open and stepped inside. There, he saw her. She lay on the floor, her silver skin glowing faintly. Her eyes were closed, and her face was calm but pale. Her clothes were torn. A small crown lay beside her head. She was hurt. Her right leg was twisted, and blood had dried on her arm. But she was alive. Tomel knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. Her eyes opened slowly. They were bright gold. She stared at him without fear. "Help," she whispered. Tomel nodded. "I will." He gave her water from his bottle. She drank slowly. Her voice was soft, but she spoke his language. "My name is Vera," she said. "I need to reach safety. But they will come for me." Tomel looked around. There was no time. The sun was rising higher. Heat waves danced in the air. No rescue could come soon. The sandstorms were too strong for long-range flights this season. The closest human outpost was 90 miles away. Tomel thought for a moment, then began to work. He pulled parts from his rover and built a stretcher. He tied strong cords and added a cover for shade. He made sure it could be dragged over the sand without breaking. Vera watched him with tired eyes. She tried to stand but fell back in pain. "You must leave me," she said. "They will come. I am not safe to protect." Tomel shook his head. "I do not leave people behind." He lifted her onto the stretcher with care. She was light but tall. Her skin felt warm like the sun had touched it too long. He gave her a small cloth to rest her head and tied the stretcher to his rover. But after a few miles, the rover hit soft sand and stopped working. The engine began to smoke. He stood in silence for a while. Then he took the cords in his hands and began to pull the stretcher himself. The sand burned through his boots. The wind hit his face. But he kept moving. For hours, they crossed the desert. When the sun became too strong, he stopped under a rock and gave her water. He ate a dry bar of food and rested for a short time. Then they moved again. Vera spoke little, but her eyes followed his every move. She saw how he used cloth to wrap his bleeding hands. She saw how he checked her wounds every time they stopped. She saw how he smiled even when his lips were dry and cracked. That night, they rested under a cliff. Tomel started a small fire and sat beside it. He looked up at the stars. "You come from up there?" he asked. Vera nodded. "Yes, from a place with forests and rivers. I was flying to escape. They did not want me to leave." "Why?" "I am a queen," she said. Tomel looked at her with surprise. She smiled. "I do not wear my crown now, but I was born to rule. They wanted to use me for power." He did not ask more. He saw the pain in her eyes. "We will reach the outpost," he said. "They will help you. You will be safe." She looked at him for a long time. "You are strong," she said. He laughed. "I am just a desert driver." "No," she said softly. "You are more than that." As the fire burned low, Tomel closed his eyes. Vera watched him as he slept. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. He had risked his life for her. He had no reason to help. Yet he did. She whispered his name once before closing her eyes. Tomorrow. The journey would continue, but something had already begun to change. The next morning, Toma woke before the sun rose. The desert was still dark and quiet. Cold wind brushed across the sand, but he knew it would not last long. Once the sun climbed high, the heat would return. He checked Vera's condition first. She was still asleep, her breathing steady. Her wounds looked better, but she could not walk yet. Toma packed their supplies and rolled up the cloth shelter. He had 3 water bottles left. One was already half empty. The food was just as small bars. He looked at the map on his device. The nearest outpost was still over 70 miles away. It was far, but not impossible. He tightened the ropes on the stretcher and began to walk. The sun rose slowly, turning the sand from gray to gold. The heat came quickly. Toma's skin burned. Under his suit, his boots sank into the soft ground. Every step took effort. The stretcher left a long trail behind him. Vera lay under a cover, her face hidden from the sun. She spoke little, only asking for water once every few hours. "Why do you do this?" she asked as they rested near a dry rock. "You could have gone home." Toma drank from the bottle and looked at her. His face was red from the sun, and sweat ran down his neck. "Because it is right," he said. "You needed help. I was there." Vera watched him carefully. "On my world, most would leave a stranger to die, even a queen. I'm not from your world," he said. He stood up and pulled the ropes again. By midday, the heat became cruel. Toma's legs felt heavy. His hands were blistered. The water was nearly gone. Still, he kept walking. Vera stayed quiet. She knew he was suffering. Her people were strong, but this human was showing a different kind of strength. That evening, they found shelter in the shadow of a broken hill. Toma built a small barrier to block the wind. He gave Vera the last piece of food and a few sips of water. He took nothing for himself. She tried to stop him, but he smiled and shook his head. "You need it more than I do," he said. As the sky turned orange, Vera used a small device from her suit. It glowed softly and passed over Toma's hands. The blisters healed a little. He looked at her with surprise. "You should have used that for yourself. I can use it once each day." She said, "Today, I used it for you." Toma sat beside her, tired but grateful. They rested through the night. Vera told him stories of her world, a place called Nyril. It had blue oceans, green towers, and flying animals with long wings. She spoke of her people, her duties as queen, and the betrayal that forced her to run. "They wanted me to marry a man I did not choose," she said. "He was cruel. My ship was shot when I tried to escape." Toma listened quietly. "And now," he asked, "if I live, I can return and change things," she said. "If I die, he will take the crown." He nodded. "Then we must keep moving." The next day, they walked again. The desert seemed endless. There were no birds, no clouds, only the burning sun and the dry wind. Toma counted each step, each mile. He drank the last drop of water before noon. His lips were cracked. His legs shook, but he did not stop. Vera tried to lift herself off the stretcher. "You cannot pull me anymore," she said. "Let me walk." "You are not ready," he said. "You are too weak," she said. He looked at her with tired eyes. "Then, help me pull," he said with a smile. Together, they tied one end of the rope to her arm. She could not walk far, but she could help him drag the stretcher. Her strength was not much, but it gave Toma hope. With both of them working, the pace grew faster. That evening, a soft sound came from the sky. Toma looked up and saw it small. Ships flying high above the clouds. They did not look human. Vera's face changed. "They are looking for me," she said. "The hunters from the rival clan." Toma moved quickly. He pulled the stretcher behind a large rock and covered it with a heat blanket. Then he ran across the sand. Dragging a piece of cloth to make false tracks, he walked in a wide circle and returned without leaving signs. The ships passed overhead and did not stop. When Toma returned to the hiding place, Vera looked at him with wide eyes. You risked yourself to protect me again, she said. He sat down and wiped the sweat from his forehead. You are my passenger, he said. I must keep you safe. She leaned forward and took his hand. You are more than that now. Tomo felt his heart beat faster. He did not speak, but her touch was gentle and warm. They spent the night without fire. The cold bit at their skin, but they stayed close and shared the heat from their bodies. Vera used her device again and healed more of his wounds. He protested, but she ignored him. I have never seen anyone like you, she whispered. The next morning, they continued their journey. The sand was harder now, and the wind had shifted. In the distance, Tomo saw shapes that looked like hills. He checked the map. We are 25 miles away, he said. That is still far, Vera replied. Yes, he said, but not as far as before. Her lips curved into a smile. You carry me across your world. She said, on mine. Stories would be written about you. I'm just a driver, he said. You are a hero, she replied. Tomo kept walking. The heat still burned, the wind still blew, but something had changed. The distance ahead no longer felt so impossible. The queen who once ruled stars now trusted a desert man with no title. And the man who once drove alone now had a reason to keep going, a reason that was becoming stronger with every step. The desert air was quiet, but Tomo felt something was wrong. The sky had turned to calm, the wind to slow. He stopped pulling the stretcher and looked up. Vera sat under the cover, her eyes scanning the blue sky. She saw at first the fast shapes move in the sky, silent and dark. They flew like birds but were machines. Their wings curved sharply, and their color matched the desert clouds. Vera's face became tense. They are not from Earth, she said. Tomo followed their path with his eyes. The ships circled in wide loops, scanning the ground. He knew they were searching. He looked at Vera. Is it them? She nodded. Yes, they are hunters, sent by my enemy to bring me back or end me. Tomo's heart pounded. They were still 20 miles from the nearest outpost. The desert gave no place to hide. The enemy ships would see them if they stayed in the open. Without a word, Tomo turned and pulled the stretcher toward a shallow rock valley. The ships passed overhead but did not stop. He reached the valley and pulled Vera under a large flat stone. The shade cooled them slightly. Vera whispered, You should leave me here. They will chase only me. Tomo shook his head. I'm not leaving you. I have come this far with you. I will finish what I started. He untied the stretcher and used the cloth to cover her. Then he picked up a metal rod from the rover parts and ran into the desert. Leaving deep footprints behind, he moved in wide paths, dragging the rod to leave marks in the sand. His plan was simple. Make the enemy think they were going in a different direction. He moved fast. Sweat soaked his clothes. The sun hit his back like fire. He ran as far as he could, then dropped the rod and hid behind a small dune. The ships passed again. This time they slowed. One of them dropped lower and followed the false tracks. Tomo waited until both ships flew away, chasing his fake trail. Then he turned and ran back toward the rock valley. When he reached Vera, she was already trying to sit up. I thought they caught you, she said. Not today, he replied. Breathing hard, she smiled. You are clever and very fast. Tomo gave her a small drink of water. Only half a bottle remained. He checked the map again. If they walked through the night, they could reach the outpost by the next evening. As the sky turned orange, Tomo helped Vera out of the hiding spot. Her leg was still hurt, but she could stand for short moments. Together, they continued the journey. That night, the desert grew cold. The stars were bright. Tomo pulled the stretcher across the sand while Vera stayed quiet. After some time, she spoke again. I have known many warriors, she said, but none who would risk so much for someone they just met. You needed help, he said. But you gave more than help, she said. You gave your strength, your time, your safety. Tomo did not know what to say. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a man who delivered supplies. But something in Vera's voice made him feel different. They rested for a few hours behind a tall dune. Vera used her healing tool again to ease the pain in Tomel's legs. He felt the warm light pass through his muscles. It gave him energy. "You should save that for yourself," he said again. "You keep saying that." She replied, "But I choose where it goes." Tomel laughed quietly. He looked at her in the starlight. Her skin reflected the moonlight. Her eyes were calm and sharp. She was not like any being he had ever seen. She was strong in mind, gentle in words, and full of mystery. They moved again after midnight. The wind had shifted, blowing from the south. Tomel noticed it carried a strange sound, a soft humming, almost like music. He stopped and listened. Vera tilted her head. "The ships are returning," she said this time. The danger felt closer. The sound grew louder. They needed to hide again. But the desert was flat in this part. Tomel scanned the horizon and saw a low structure in the distance. It looked like a ruined station, half buried in sand. He pulled the stretcher faster, his legs burning. Vera helped push from behind. They reached the structure just as the humming filled the air. Tomel dragged her inside and covered the entrance with sand. The roof was broken, but thick enough to hide them from scanning eyes. Inside, it smelled of rust and dry dust. Vera sat against the wall, breathing hard. Tomel peeked through a crack. The ships flew overhead, slow and low. One of them shined a blue light across the sand, searching. It passed near the ruin but did not stop. After a few long minutes, both ships turned and flew west. Vera touched Tomel's arm. "You keep saving me," she said. "It is becoming a habit." He answered. She smiled again, but her eyes were serious. "If we live through this," she said, "I will not forget what you have done." Tomel looked at her for a long time. "I'm not doing this to be remembered," he said. "I just don't like seeing good people left behind." Vera looked down, then back at him. "On my world, people who act with honor are rare. They speak of it, but few live by it. On my world," he said, "most people are just trying to survive. I guess we're not so different." They stayed in the ruin until dawn. Then Tomel checked the sky once more. It was clear. They came out and continued walking. The heat returned quickly. Tomel gave Vera the last of the water. He had none left for himself. His vision blurred at times, but he kept moving. The outpost was close now, maybe 10 miles away. Vera tried to walk again. Her leg was stronger. She leaned on Tomel for balance. Together, they moved faster. By evening, they saw a tall tower in the distance. A small human flag waved in the dry wind. The outpost was real. Tomel nearly fell from relief. He dropped to his knees. Vera held him. "You did it," she said. "You brought me to safety." He looked up at her with tired eyes. "No," he said. "We made it together." The final steps were slow, but they reached the gates just as the sun began to fall. A group of human guards ran out to help them. Tomel passed out as they lifted him from the ground. Vera stood tall as the medics came to her side. She looked at Tomel before they took him away. He had saved her from death, from enemies, from the burning desert. And now, her heart was no longer her own. Tomel opened his eyes slowly. Bright white lights above him made him blink. He was lying on a soft bed inside a clean room. Cool air touched his face. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then he remembered the desert, the heat, the hunger. The hunters in the sky, and the long walk across endless sand. He sat up with a sharp breath. Pain shot through his arms and back. His hands were bandaged. His skin was red from the sun. But he was alive. A human nurse walked in and smiled. "You're awake," she said. "You've been sleeping for 2 days." "Where is she?" Tomel asked. "She's safe," the nurse said. "She's in the room next to yours." She asked about you many times. Tomel relaxed. He lay back on the bed and closed his eyes for a moment. He had done it. He had carried the wounded queen through the worst desert on the planet. And now, she was safe. Later that day, Vera entered his room. She wore a white robe and walked with a slight limp. Her silver skin had healed, and her crown was now clean and fixed. But her eyes stayed on Tomel as if nothing else in the room mattered. "You woke up," she said softly. "I couldn't stay asleep forever," he replied. She pulled a chair close and sat beside his bed. You look stronger than before. I feel like I was hit by a mountain, Tomel said. You carried me across the fire desert, she said. You faced death more than once, yet you still stand. Tomel smiled. It wasn't just me. You helped. We made it together. Vera looked down, then back at him. I owe you everything, she said. Tomel shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I did it because I wanted to. There was a pause between them. The silence felt soft, not heavy. Vera's eyes glowed gently in the light. Her voice lowered. Tomel, there's something I must tell you. He sat up, curious. What is it? I am not only a queen. I am the last direct heir to the high line of Nyril. If I return home, I will take the throne, but only if I stand strong before the other clans. What happens if you don't? They will choose someone else, probably the one who tried to force me into marriage. My return must be more than survival. It must be victory. Tomel nodded slowly. And what will you do now? I must return, but I do not want to go alone. Tomel raised his eyebrows. You mean you want guards to go with you? She shook her head. No, I want you. Tomel stared at her. Me? Yes, she said. You risked your life for mine. You walked through storms, faced hunters, and gave me strength when I had none. I cannot ignore what I feel. Tomel looked away for a moment. I'm just a supply driver. I'm not from your world. You are more than what you do, she said. You showed me honor, courage, and heart on my world. These are the traits of true leaders. Tomel felt his chest tighten. Vera, I don't know your people. I don't know how to live in a palace or speak in front of a crowd. You will learn, she said. With me, he looked at her again. Her hand reached out and held his. Her touch was warm and steady. I need time to think, Tomel said. She nodded. I will wait. The next few days passed quickly. News spread about the alien queen who had survived a crash and reached safety with the help of a human. Leaders visited the outpost. They asked Vera questions and offered her aid. Some treated her like a guest. Others treated her like a mystery. Vera answered calmly but kept her words short. She spent most of her time near Tomel. They walked together in the small garden behind the base. She told him more about her world. He told her stories from Earth.1. Evening, a great storm hit the desert. The sky turned dark, and winds howled around the base. Power flickered. Scent slammed against the walls like waves. The ground shook from distant thunder. Tomel and Vera sat near a window and watched the storm. You walked through worse than this, she said. It feels different now, he said. Back then, I didn't know if we'd make it. Now we're safe. But safety doesn't last forever, she said. New storms will come. Tomel looked at her. Are you afraid? I used to be, she said. Now I'm not. Why not? Because I found someone who doesn't run from storms. Tomel smiled. Neither did you. She laughed softly. The storm outside roared louder, but inside the room, there was peace. The next morning, the sky was clear again. A ship arrived. From Earth's Central Command, they offered to take Vera anywhere she wanted. She stood before the base's officers and spoke clearly. I will return to Nyril, but I do not go as a runaway. I go as a queen who survived by her own will, with help from the strongest soul I have met. She turned to Tomel. If he chooses to come with me, he will stand beside me, not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as my equal. Everyone in the room looked at Tomel. He felt his throat go dry. Later, Tomel walked alone through the quiet edge of the base. The desert stretched out before him. He remembered each step, each mile, each breath in the heat. He remembered Vera's words, her eyes, her voice. He thought about what kind of life waited on her world. He did not know how to be royal. He did not know alien customs or court rules. But he knew one thing. He did not want to let her go. The ship that came from Earth's command center was larger than any Tomel had seen. Its silver body shined under the sun, and its engines hummed softly. Soldiers, officers, and doctors stepped out with sharp movements and serious faces. They were there to ask questions, collect reports, and take the queen to safety. But what they found was not just a rescue story. It was something more. something unexpected. Inside the meeting hall of the outpost, the top officers stood in a row. Behind them were screens showing images of the crashed alien ship, satellite, maps, and Tomel's long desert path. Everyone was silent as Vera entered the room. She wore a new robe, gifted by the human crew. Her silver crown rested on her head. Her wounds were healed, and her eyes were strong. She walked without help. Tomel stood at the side of the room. His clothes were clean, and his hands were still wrapped in light bandages. He had been asked to stay out of the discussion, but Vera had requested his presence. She would not speak. Without him nearby, one of the officers, a tall man with cold eyes, began the meeting. "We are honored to host you, Queen Vera," he said. "We welcome you in peace. But we must understand what happened. Why were you flying alone? Why did enemy ships follow you to our skies?" Vera stepped forward. "I come from the world of Nyril. My journey was not one of war but escape. I was fleeing a forced union. One of the clan leaders tried to take control of the throne through marriage. I refused. He chased me with his private fleet. I flew far and fast. My ship was damaged and fell on this planet." She paused and looked at Tomel. "I would have died in your desert, but this man saved me. He gave me food, water, and shelter. He pulled me across sand and stone. He faced fire, wind, and enemies without fear. Not because he had to, but because he chose to." The officers whispered among themselves. The lead man spoke again. "This man is a civilian, a supply runner. He is not trained for combat or diplomacy." Vera nodded. "That is why he is rare. He did not save me for power or reward. He did it because he has honor. That is something I cannot ignore." She turned back to the room. "I do not come asking for protection. I come offering peace. I will return to Nyril and claim my throne. But I will not forget what this man has done. I want him to come with me, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as my chosen partner." Tomel felt the air shift in the room. Eyes turned to him. He stood still, his heart beating fast. He was not used to attention, and he never wanted fame. But here he was, standing beside a queen, being called something far greater than he believed he was later. Tomel sat in the small garden behind the base. The sky was quiet. The wind was soft. He looked at the desert that had nearly taken his life. Each mile came back to him, each painful step, each moment beside Vera. She came and sat next to him. "You do not have to decide now," she said. "I will understand if you say no." Tomel looked at her. "It is not fear that holds me. It is the unknown." Vera nodded. "I understand. Nyril is very different from Earth. You will have to learn many new things." "I'm not afraid of learning," he said. "I'm just wondering if I belong there." She smiled. "You belong where you are needed. You belong where you are respected. You belong where your heart leads you." Tomel stayed quiet for a moment. "Back on Earth, I was just a driver," he said. "But out here, I became something more. You became a hero," she said. He looked at her. "And you became more than a queen to me." They sat in silence for a while, but it was a silence filled with meaning. The next day, Earth Command held a private meeting with Vera and Tomel. They offered to escort her back to Nyril. They also offered to send trained diplomats, bodyguards, and support teams. Vera accepted the help but made one thing clear. "Tomel goes with me," she said. "This is not a request. It is part of my decision as queen." The officers agreed, though they looked unsure. One of them asked Tomel quietly, "Are you ready for this?" Tomel answered, "I walked 90 miles through fire and storm to protect her. I think I'm ready." Before departure, Tomel visited the desert one last time. He stood on a high hill and looked at the land. He thought about the man he was before the crash. He thought about the man he became with each mile he pulled that stretcher. Vera joined him at the hilltop. "I used to hate this desert," she said. "But now, it feels like the place where I was reborn." Tomel nodded. "Same for me." She held out her hand. "Will you walk beside me, even in places you have never seen?" He took her hand. "I already have." The ship that carried them to the stars lifted gently into the sky. Soldiers saluted. Officers watched. and somewhere in the sand below, the desert winds carried away the footprints of a man and a queen. They were no longer just survivors, they were partners, walking into a future neither had planned, but both were ready to face. The ship glided smoothly through space. It was quiet inside, and the stars outside looked like silver dust on black velvet. Tomo stood by the window, staring at the galaxy ahead. He had never left Earth's orbit before. Now he was flying to another world with a queen beside him. Vera entered the room. She was dressed in a light silver robe. Her crown set aside, she looked more like a friend than a ruler now. Tomo turned to her and smiled. "It still feels like a dream," he said. Vera nodded. "It felt the same to me when I first left my home as a young girl. Space is large and full of strange places, but we find meaning by choosing where we stand," Tomo laughed. "I used to carry boxes and drive across deserts. Now I'm flying to another planet. People on Earth would never believe this." "They will," she said softly. "You are not just a driver anymore." The journey lasted for more days. During that time, Tomo learned more about Nyril. Vera taught him her language, basic customs, and signs of respect. He studied the maps of her world. Nyril had wide green plains, crystal blue oceans, and tall silver cities. The capital, Elvalmar, sat on a mountain covered with blue trees and glowing flowers. On the 5th day, the ship entered Nyril's space. Two royal guard ships flew beside them. Tomo looked at them from the window. "They don't look too happy," he said. Vieira stayed calm. "Some of them still follow the old ways. They believe only nobles should rule. They will not accept you easily." "I don't need their acceptance," he said. "I just want to help you." "That is why I chose you," she said. When they landed, a crowd waited outside the spaceport. Hundreds of Nyrilians stood in rows, wearing robes of green and silver. Soldiers stood tall with long staffs. A red carpet stretched from the ship to a large hall built with white stone and blue glass. Tomo stepped out with Vera. Cameras clicked, flags waved. The wind carried strange scents from flowers nearby. Every step he took felt heavy with meaning. Inside the hall, the Council of Nyril waited. 12 elders sat on high chairs, their faces calm but sharp. One of them, a tall woman with golden skin and silver hair, stood and spoke. "Queen Vera, you have returned. We honor your strength and survival, but we question your choice. You bring with you a man from Earth, a planet not bound by our ways. Vera, step forward. I bring with me the man who saved my life, a man who crossed death for me, a man who did not seek power but earned respect." Another elder, this one with deep blue eyes, spoke. "Does he understand our law? Does he respect our past?" Tomo raised his hand gently. "I may not know all your laws. I may not be part of your past, but I was there when she was hurt. I gave her food from my hands. I pulled her through fire. I stood by her when no one else could." His voice was calm, honest. "I didn't do it to earn a crown. I did it because it was right." The room was silent. Then one elder stood and bowed his head. "That is more honor than many nobles have shown in our history." Vera smiled. "I will stand beside him as queen and as woman." The elders spoke in quiet tones for a while. Then the lead elder turned to them. "Let the people see his strength. Let him pass the trials of Nyril. If he succeeds, none shall question your choice." Vera frowned. "He is not one of your warriors." Tomo touched her arm. "It's all right. I will face their trials. I don't want to be accepted by words. I want to earn it." She looked at him and nodded slowly. "You are brave." The next day, Tomo was taken to the field of trials. It was a wide open space filled with stone paths, high pillars, and moving machines. Nyrilians gathered to watch. Some cheered, some stayed quiet. The first trial was the trial of endurance. He had to carry a heavy block across a long path while wind machines blew against him. Tomo remembered the desert, the weight of the stretcher, the heat on his back. He kept walking, step by step. The crowd watched in silence as he reached the finish line. The second trial was the trial of balance. He had to cross narrow beams while the ground shifted below. His legs shook, but he moved slowly. He remembered how he had once carried Vera. across broken ground witut dropping her. That memory gave him strength. The third trial was the trial of honor. He was placed in front of a false enemy who insulted him. The test was simple. Do not respond with anger. The enemy yelled and pushed, but Tomel stood still. He stayed quiet. After the final trial, the elders met again. He is not fast like our warriors, one of them said, but he is strong. He is not trained in our ways, another said, but his heart is clear. When Vera heard the results, she walked to Tomel and took his hand. You have passed, she said. Tomel smiled. I did not do it to prove myself. I did it because I meant what I said. That night, the city of Elvamar lit up with silver lights. Music filled the air. People gathered in the main square. For the first time in many years, the Queen of Nyril stood in front of her people with hope in her eyes. She raised her hand. This man saved my life, she said. Not with weapons, but with kindness. Not with power, but with courage. I have chosen him not just for what he did, but for who he is. The crowd listened. I will make him my partner, not because it is tradition, but because it is truth. People began to cheer. Slowly, then louder. The sound filled the sky. Tomel looked at the stars. He had no crown, no armor, and no long title. But he had something more. He had earned the heart of a queen, and the respect of a world far from his own. The day of the royal bonding ceremony arrived. The entire city of Elvamar was shining with light. Silver flags flew on tall towers, and flowers with glowing petals lined the streets. Bells rang gently across the mountain, and people from every corner of Nyril had gathered in the capital. Tomel stood in a grand hall made of crystal glass and white stone. He wore a long robe of dark blue with silver edges. Around his neck was a small necklace given by Vera. It held a piece of Nyrilian starstone, the rarest crystal on the planet. It showed he was chosen. Tomel still could not believe how much had changed in so little time. A few weeks ago, he was just a delivery man driving across the desert. Now he stood as the partner of a queen, accepted by her people and respected by the council. The hall doors opened and Vera entered. Her dress was made from fine threads that shimmered like moonlight. Her hair was tied with glowing flowers, and her eyes were calm and proud. She looked like a queen, but she also looked like someone full of love. The crowd inside the hall bowed. The music began. Slow and soft, Vera walked toward Tomel, and when she stood beside him, the high priest of Nyril stepped forward. Today, we honor the bond of hearts, not blood. We bring together two souls from different stars. One is our queen, strong and wise. The other is a man of earth, brave and kind. This bond is not forced by law, but chosen by truth. Tomel and Vera faced each other. They held hands. No rings were placed. Instead, they touched their foreheads, a Nyrilian sign of deep trust. The priest raised his staff. Let it be known across stars and skies. These two now walk as one. Let no wall, no fear, no tradition break this bond. Cheers filled the hall. Music rose louder. Flowers dropped from the roof above them like soft rain. Tomel smiled as Vera leaned closer. I never thought I would be here, he whispered. You were meant to be, she replied. That evening, a great celebration began. Streets were filled with dancing, food, and glowing lanterns. People sang songs of new hope. In the royal garden, Tomel and Vera walked quietly, away from the noise. I was afraid they would never accept me, he said. They saw your heart, Vera replied. That is what matters here. Do you think this will last? He asked. A human living on Nyril? It will, she said, because we will build it together. Tomel sat by a small fountain and looked at the stars. I miss Earth. Sometimes, the sand, the roads, the quiet mornings, you can visit, she said. But now you have to homes. A few days later, Tomel began training with the royal advisors. He learned Nyrilian history, trade systems, and peacekeeping. Laws. Vera did not want him to be just her partner in name. She wanted him to stand beside her in duty as well. At first, some nobles whispered doubts. They watched him closely, but Tomel worked hard. He asked questions. He listened. He showed respect, Slowly, even the coldest hearts began to see that he truly cared. One day, Vera called a council meeting. A new planet had opened trade talks. The other leaders expected the Queen to lead the talks alone. But Vera said, "Toma will speak with me. His voice is mine." Some council members looked unsure. One of them stood. "He is not of Nyril." The elders said, "His ways are not ours." Tomel stood too. "That is true," he said. "But I bring the way of understanding. If we only listen to ourselves, we become silent to the galaxy." There was silence in the room. Then the elder sat down slowly. "You speak with wisdom," he said. Vera smiled. The talks moved forward, and the deal was successful. Tomel's part in it gained attention. Some even called him the bridge between worlds. Weeks passed. Life began to settle. Tomel and Vera spent their evenings walking through the palace gardens or reading together in the old library. Their bond grew stronger, not because of duty, but because of simple moments shared each day. One morning, as they watched the twin suns rise, Tomel said, "I think I've found something more valuable than any treasure." "What is that?" Vera asked. "A place where I belong. Not just in this palace or in your world, but in your heart." Vera touched his hand. "You carried me across fire when I had no strength. Now I will carry you through every storm that comes. Together, we will guide our people and protect peace." From that day, Tomel was no longer seen as an outsider. He was given the name Starbound, which meant one who travels across stars but stays true. Stories of the human who carried the wounded queen spread to other planets. Visitors from far-off worlds came to see the couple who had proven that love, courage, and kindness could cross even the widest galaxy. Years later, children in Nyril learned about Tomel in school. Statues were built in his honor, not as a warrior, but as a man who chose to do what was right. And in a quiet corner of the palace, there stood a simple statue of him holding the queen in his arms. Walking across the desert, that statue reminded everyone that greatness sometimes begins with one small choice. Tomel never forgot the desert, the heat, or the moment he found her injured and afraid. He never forgot how a simple act of kindness had led him to a new life, a new love, and a new home among the stars. And Queen Vera, who once ruled alone, never again walked without him beside her. Together, they proved that the heart can carry more than weight, and that love, when true, can travel farther than light.